huge relief today for people in the regions. They're in Victoria. Melburnians hopefully have a bit of hope as well.
Indeed, yes. Yes, a lot of hope in the regions. For those of us who are fortunate to be outside the lockdown area, the Melbourne metropolitan area, yes, it is. The sun's shining, spring's here, the leaves are on the trees, and we're going to be able to move about almost as normal from very shortly indeed. I guess that what Daniel Andrews is hoping that what is occurring in regional Victoria, that will give hope to the people suffering under lockdown now for many, many weeks in metropolitan Melbourne. You'd have to think there might be a bit of resentment too for people who are in that predicament, while people like me are freer than we've been for a very long time. I think the other good news that we've seen here too is the fact that school, at least in the regions, may be able to return when term resumes in 2.5, 3 weeks' time. And that will be a big relief for a lot of parents, me included. Whether or not this works for Daniel Andrews in the long term, it's certainly the case that this is the first really good news he's been able to announce for quite a while. And if I could just go to that, I've been a bit intrigued by the fact that it seems that support for Daniel Andrews in these circumstances hasn't suffered as much as you might have expected. And I wonder whether it's the case that not for business, not for big or small business, who are very, very angry about the slow pace of a return to normality, but for a lot of other people who are thinking about their health before their employment. Now, that's understandable, and they're also being supported, of course, by JobKeeper, so a bit of the pressure is off there, but it's not surprising that in those circumstances, people would be thinking about their health, and that would be uppermost in their mind. And after the debacle of the quarantine hotels and also of what was happening in aged care facilities, that they would be thankful that they're in a circumstance where they feel a relative amount of safety despite all the onerous restrictions that are on them. I wonder whether that is part of the explanation. I've got no data, no evidence, but I'm just trying to work my way through this, and I am a bit surprised and somewhat intrigued that support for Daniel Andrews hasn't fallen further, or does not appear to have fallen further than you might have expected in these circumstances.
Yeah, and some similar sentiments, I think, when it comes to the border wars as well, Jim. I mean, we have seen people in states like WA and Queensland seeming to be quite supportive of it, but then you get these cases, as we have in the past week increasingly, about compassionate requests that have been rejected, and there does seem to be a growing sense of anger about that. When it comes to the hard border internationally, getting Australians home from overseas is a nightmare for the federal government. It's been one that's been closely managed as well in conjunction with the states. There's this idea that's been put forward that perhaps this could be run federally. There could be a management of the process, getting people into facilities that are already in place outside of Darwin, for example. Something needs to happen here, doesn't it? Because we are starting to see tensions rise over these difficult situations of getting Australians home from overseas and also in between the states as they want to and need to in some circumstances.
Well, look, it's all very well for the Prime Minister to berate Anastasia Palaszczuk over that really terrible situation that family found themselves in a week or so ago. But the fact of the matter is that the federal government, at the moment at least, does not control the internal borders of Australia. One thing is for sure, it controls our international borders. And yes, there are something like 25,000 people, Australians, overseas at the moment who are in various states of distress about whether they can get home or not. You would have thought that by now, somewhat 6 or 7 months into this crisis, that the federal government would have some greater plans to enable these people to get home should they wish to. And I noticed, for example, that Warren Entsch, the Liberal member from far north Queensland, suggesting, for example, that Cairns and the underutilised tourist hotels in Cairns could be used as for quarantine arrangements for some of these people to be brought home. And I think that by having in fact, drawn attention to the plight of that terrible plight for that bereaving family in Queensland. The Prime Minister has effectively drawn attention to himself on what is not being done as far as getting Australians who wish to home from overseas. And I would have thought, and I would expect, and I hope that the government is redoubling its efforts as far as that is concerned, because care and attention for citizens, the well-being and security of them ought to be uppermost in the mind of all federal governments. And it is the case that they can do something, and it is now time, I would have thought, where they do more, and if they do not, I think it may well come back to bite Scott Morrison and maybe Peter Dutton as well.